everybody. My name is Kim. I am your co-host for Tragedy to Triumph with Dave Reaver. We're excited to have you with us today. Sitting here across the table from my dad and just looking forward to a great podcast today.
It's going to be a especially amazing podcast. I'm telling you right now. And if you're on audio only, if you can go to YouTube at some point, you got to see this, because one of the best friends I've ever had in my life, a kid I love with all my heart, he's part of this show today. But before we get to Brad Hearon, who'll be the superstar guest, just a couple of things, maybe a little business here, Kim. I'm coming up on one of the best summers I've ever had, and God's been speaking to me in very unusual ways, and probably not the next podcast, but the one after that. So 2 podcasts from now, I'm likely, now I'm not going to guarantee, but I'm likely to share one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had proceeding with God in my walk with Christ since I was a child. It's really amazing what happened and how it came down. And I've shared it with a few folks. Everybody I've shared it with just almost collapses with amazement. So it's really something to look forward to, about 2 podcasts away. And coming up also on the next podcast is Shiloh Harris, an American hero, burn victim. But we don't call ourselves victim. We call ourselves burn survivors. But I'm dedicating 2 programs here to 2 of the finest men I know that have gone through living hell, and I mean living hell. So it's going to be a great podcast here in a moment. I want to say thanks to the people that have been writing in and calling, and as I tour across America, and I just got in from a long tour all the way to the West Coast, and in points in between going and points in between coming back. People are watching this podcast or listening to it, and I'm getting some wonderful feedback. Kimmy, they love you, baby. They love the interaction we have when we communicate. So just wanted to bring you some good news from the road.
Well, I love it. It's always nice to be wanted. You know, I heard the phrase, like, I want to go where I'm wanted, not tolerated.
That's
and,
a good line.
That's always kind of the case when we are, whenever we put our heart into something, you want to make sure that you're contributing in the best way possible. And
Kimmy, what you're going to give in this podcast, I want to throw the ball in your court a few times, because I know that you're more interested in what Brad and I have to say, and we talked about that before the program here. But I really would like to have a child's point of view, because we're going to have several points of view come up here about children with Brad and his beautiful child. So anyway, why don't we get to Brad here right away?
Absolutely.
Right. From the northern part of the state of Texas. I mean, Kansas.
It's like Texas.
Well, actually, his story began in Texas. And I've known Brad since he was injured, horribly burned. I remember the day he rolled up in was pushed up in a wheelchair. And I thought, this kid is going to die before I have a chance to have even a moment of time with him. His parents wanted me to mentor him, and I was, at that point, I was in a very ill condition physically. And I remember thinking, sure, I'll mentor him, because he won't last 6 weeks. He'll be dead in 6 weeks. And today, one of the greatest stories of survival and God's intervention is about to be told. And Kimmy, let's welcome Brad Hearon. Brad, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing very well, Dave. Thank you very much for having me on and thinking about me.
Well, we think about you all the time, because, of course, you're part of our family and friend and fellow servant of the Lord, but you're also one of the best high school speakers I've ever known in my life, and I've had the joy of having a little bit of influence in your life, but I want you to tell your story, Brad. I want the folks to hear from you today. I'm really, really, really thankful that a guy like you, what you've been through, is willing to open up and just be vulnerable and candid about it. So I'm going to shoot the ball into your court, and you go for it, buddy.
Thank you, Dave. My name is Brad Hearon, and I was privileged to be able to be mentored by Dave for about the last 15 to 20 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I was born and raised in Southwest Kansas. I wasn't injured in an honorable way. I wasn't burned in a tragic house fire or a car accident, a war in Iraq or Afghanistan. I was actually burned at the age of 19 manufacturing methamphetamines, a drug epidemic that we have seen sweep through our country back in the early 2000s whenever I was burned. Um, Meth lab explosions were a pretty common thing that you would see on the news. And I was out there falling right into that drug epidemic. You know, I was blessed to probably have more positive male role models in my life than anybody could ever ask for. I wasn't raised in a family that where drug addiction or alcoholism or anything like that was mentored in front of me. My father was a pastor, and I grew up in a pastor's home. Grew up on a big farm in Southwest Kansas. We raised corn and wheat and soybeans and cotton, and I just really started to make some poor life choices whenever I got into my junior high and high school age. There's a coined phrase out there by a lady by the name of Jana Mayo that says, "Show me your friends and I will show you your future." And a lot of people say that that's my quote. It's not my quote. Jana Mayo, she's the one that coined it. But show me your friends and I'll show you your future. That is such a true statement because that's what happened to me in my life. I started to run with the wrong crowd. I started to allow myself to be influenced by people that didn't have the same hopes and dreams and goals and ambitions that I had in my life. And eventually I fell into the same things that they were doing. It started off small with smoking a little bit of marijuana and justifying things to myself. Oh, I'm just young. I'm just having fun. This won't affect me when I get older. And it gradually progressed its way into being a full blown meth addict by the time that I was 17 years old and shoving a needle in my arm and shooting up drugs. And had a cousin that had just got out of prison. He had one of the first meth labs ever busted in Southwest Kansas back in the late 90s in 99. And he got out of prison, and my dad told me, he says, "Brad, do not go look up your knuckleheaded cousin." And I went and looked him up. And I'll never forget that day, Dave, that I walked up to his trailer house and knocked on the door. And this cousin, he was a big influence on my life. He always he was a really good looking young man. Always had the prettiest girlfriend, fastest crotch rocket. He loved riding four-wheelers, stuff that I really enjoyed doing. We had a lot of fun whenever I was growing up. And I think in my heart at that point, I really wanted to see him doing good after he got out of prison. But I remember walking up to that trailer house, knocking on the door. He opens up the door, and sitting right in front of him was a big pile of white powder. And
Oh,
he opened me up. He opened me or welcomed me in with open arms and told me, "Oh, Brad, so good to see you," and everything. And I just remember looking over there at that tray and thinking, I thought this, I didn't say it, just thinking, man, what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, this stuff had robbed everything from him. It had taken his wife, it had taken his kids away. He had lost the farm because of the choices he was making. It had even taken his freedom. And he less than 6 weeks of being out of prison, he was right back doing the same thing. And that probably should have been, a sign enough for me to stay away from this stuff, the kind of hold that it can have on a person. But then again, I thought, well, I'm just going to try it once. I'm just going to see what it's like. I'm not going to become that guy. And I tried it for the first time. And for just some statistics to throw out there, for a person who does cocaine twice, about 96% of those people are going to become a cocaine addict. For
wow.
a person who does heroin twice, 98% of those people are going to become a heroin addict. For a person who does methamphetamines twice, 98.9% of people will become a meth addict. And out of that 98.9% of people, only 1 out of 8 will ever recover.
Goodness.
And so Yeah, I had no clue what I was getting ready to experience and to put into my body. And I did it that night and I left and probably came back a week later or so. I don't remember exactly how long it was. And that time, whenever I came back and looked him up, he looked at me and says, "Well, Brad, do you want to learn how to make this stuff?" And so at the age of 17, I learned how to manufacture methamphetamines and I became a meth cook, I guess you could have called me. And, you know, it started off small, but that it got big quick and started to affect my life very quick. Ended up getting kicked out of high school my senior year and had to finish off my senior year in an alternative program. And after that, I just moved back to the farm. And, whenever I was young, my dreams and goals were maybe a little bit different than some people. All I ever wanted to do in life was to farm. And yeah, I love playing football as well. And so I wanted to go play football for the University of Nebraska. I like those red uniforms and get a culture. And then if I didn't end up becoming a professional football player, then I was just going to go back and be a farmer. And that drug tried to rob everything from me. It ended up messing up all the football chances that I had and things like that. But that one goal that had my farm, I mean, it still looked like it was going to be an option. And I did real good. I stayed away from it for a little bit whenever I moved back to the farm and started farming. And then had a friend look me up, started hanging out again, and got back into it again. And I ended up walking away from my family farm and walking away from everything one night just to go out and score some drugs. And on January 7th, 2003, I was in my little hotel motel apartment, little flea bag apartment that I lived in, and had a young girl come up to my house, and I'd grown up with her. She told me there was a party going on at her house and asked me if I would like to come over. They were wanting some drugs or wanting some meth and asked if I had any. And I told her I had a little bit. Went over to her house and sold the guys at the house the drugs, and they went into a back room and consumed the drugs. And I just stayed in the living room talking to her.
Now,
And
Brad,
probably 45. Yes,
just
yes,
before you
sir.
go any further, I want to
Yeah.
pause just a moment. I want to tell people right now, call somebody, tell them what you're watching on your screen or listening to. Tell them about this podcast because the part you're about to get into right now, Brad, is one of the most amazing, horrific, and glory to God endings of anything I've ever heard in my life. And when people see and hear what you're about to tell, all I can say is if you're watching right now on YouTube or whatever platform you're listening to, get your family together. Your children need to hear about what's about to be said. Brad, carry on, my friend. Carry on.
Yes, sir. And went over. They came out and said, "Man, that was good stuff, Brad. Can you get any more?" And I didn't have any more at that time. I had all the ingredients to make more, but I didn't have any more on me. And I looked at the guy that owned the house and I said, "Well, I don't have any more on me, but I can get some. If you want to go with me, you can go with me." And he said, "Sure." Now, people knew that I had the drugs a lot of times. Not many people actually knew that I was the actual person that was making the drugs. And so he thought we were probably going to buy the drugs somewhere, I imagine. But we drove over to my apartment and we grabbed my duffel bag full of supplies. We drove out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I live in a very, very rural area of America. I mean, it's like 9 people per square mile. So, I mean, it's very secluded, very rural. We drove out into the country down a very secluded 2-track road. I mean, to where nobody could see you, down in kind of a little low spot in a gully. And it was January 7th out of 2003. It was 17 degrees out that night. So we had the windows, and I had an El Camino, SS El Camino, and we had the windows cracked about that much, about an inch and a half, 2 inches, just enough to let the fumes ventilate out. We had the heater on full blast inside of that vehicle just to try to stay warm. And I was at the very final stage of producing the drug. I had an 8 by 10 glass Pyrex dish, like you make casseroles or brownies or something of that nature in. And inside this pan, it had 24 ounces of ether, starting fluid, a highly, highly, highly flammable substance. This is the same substance that you use on a cold winter morning to fire off a diesel engine. The mere vapor of this substance can combust with just a single spark. And I had 24 ounces of it in its liquid state sitting in my lap in a pan. Not something that anybody should ever do. And the young man that I was with, I still remember it to this day, very, very clear and very vividly. You know, he pulled out his pack of cigarettes, and I knew he was about to light a cigarette, and I didn't try to stop him. I had smoked around it before and never had an issue. But that night, that ether vapor had built up inside the cab of that El Camino because the windows were just barely cracked. And there was enough ether vapor inside that vehicle when he sparked that lighter to light that cigarette. It went woof,
Wow.
and it caught the top ether layer on fire in the pan that I was holding. So we weren't necessarily burned at this point, maybe a little singed, but not burned. A lot like if you let the propane go in the propane grill too long and you hit that igniter button and it makes that flash. That's what happened. But I'm holding this pan out in front of me and it's catching the headliner on fire inside of my vehicle. And I look at the young man I'm with and I tell him, get out, get out, get out. And he jumps out of the passenger side of the vehicle. And once he jumps out of the passenger side of the vehicle, I just try to throw this pan out after him. And there was such a combustion and such an explosion that happened at that moment when I threw this pan that all the oxygen was sucked out of the vehicle and it sucked the door back shut that he had just jumped out of. Now I was entombed and I was encased
My
in
God.
fire.
Wow.
I remember grabbing the door and trying to hit it as hard as I could to get out, but I couldn't do it. I wasn't physically strong enough to push that door open because of the suction that was being created by the cracks in the windows. Those cracks that had once ventilated out the fumes now were supplying that fire with oxygen that it needed to continue to burn. And I leaned back in my seat and I remember opening up my eyes. I'd fought all that I could and I just thought it was over. And I took a breath. And I thought at that moment that, you know, it would just be over. It just, the fire would stop and I would be gone. But it wasn't over. And I got to see hell firsthand account of what hell looked like, smelt like. I mean, it was the most scared that I've ever been in my life. It's hard for me to explain that place to a person. You know, it's hard for me to actually comprehend what I saw right then. Because Dave, as you and I, Kim, as you and I are all sitting here right now, you know we live today and we're going to die someday, but to absolutely be able to grasp the understanding of eternity, none of us can do that. We can in our mind understand what absolute eternity truly means. And at that moment, I understood what eternity meant.
Wow.
I understood that I was going to be in this place for all of eternity. And I mean, like I was a Christian. I mean, I love Jesus with all my heart. I was called into the ministry whenever I was in seventh grade. I mean, I heard the Lord speak to me audibly whenever I was in seventh grade and tell me, you know, what my purpose on this earth was. And it was to see people's lives changed by my testimony and by the truth that he spoke through me. And I knew at that moment that I had not completed that plan that he had for me because I know that it was God that spoke that to me.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom just saying, wait a second, God, wait a second, Jesus, I can't be dead. I can't be in hell. I know what you told me whenever I was in seventh grade. This can't be it. This can't be over. And no sooner than I made that conscious thought, the door to my vehicle opened up. And when it opened up, I mean, stop, drop, and roll took on a whole new meaning. I mean, I was rolling, and getting the fire out. And finally, I got the fire out, and I stand up, and all I have left on me is my boxers and one sock. Everything else had been burned off of me. And I look at the young man that's still there with me, and I tell him, "Man, you're gonna have to go for help, but I can't go. I mean, I can't. I'm barely standing here." And he left. And to tell a person how good of people those people in that lifestyle are with you, he left me out there. He sure did, and made his way all the way back home. I laid out there in that field for 4.5 hours. He got back home to his house, told his wife that they just needed to act like they had never seen me that night, that I was dead. And she drove back out there just to see if I was dead or not, by the grace of God. And well, she got back out there. I jumped in her vehicle. We drove to the hospital in Liberal, Kansas, and they life flighted me from Liberal, Kansas to the Via Christi St. Francis Burn Center in Wichita, Kansas, where they gave me 1/10 of 1% chance to live, Dave. 1/10 of one. That's not very good off,
No.
you know. And I spent 4.5 months in a drug-induced coma, and then after that, uh, there's just so many things that I could tell you during that 4.5 months. You're looking at a documented miracle sitting in front of you.
Yes,
I
you
mean,
are.
and no medical miracle, because medical science gave me 1/10 of a% chance to live. And you know, I got out of that. I spent every single holiday of 2003 in the hospital except for Christmas. I got to go home for Christmas, and then endured numerous reconstructive surgeries after that. I've had over 40 surgeries. I think Dave's about the only person in the world that has me beat on that. But
Wow.
yeah, I traveled, and I met Dave just right after I got out of the hospital. I was still in really bad shape. I couldn't even care for myself. Dave told me at that point, he said, Brad, whenever you're back and you can take care of yourself, I want you to travel and speak with me. And, people tell you a lot of things in life. And I didn't think he really meant it. I knew that he had said it, but if Dave Reaver, if he says something, it's going to happen.
He means
And
it.
he does. And I'll never forget where I was at the day that phone call came in, and he says, "Brad, I'm opening up a ranch in southern Colorado, and it's for wounded vets, guys that have been in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I want you to come and go through the very first session, and I want you to be my warrior on the war on drugs." And I was like, "Oh, heck yeah, free trip to Colorado." At that time, we were doing sessions for 2 weeks time.
Yeah.
And if I sleep in the mountains in this beautiful lodge, I mean, I'm in. And oh my goodness, what a life-changing experience it's been since then. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years, Dave. It blows
Wow.
my mind that it's been that long.
Brad, it's been 20 years, but it's been 20 days in the sensation of what time seemed like, because time just flies when you have time's fun when you're having flies. But Brad,
Right.
as you've been telling this story, my mind raced back occasion after occasion after occasion of our working together, and how teachable you are and were, especially during those days. And I remember whenever we had our first graduation, Kim, I don't know if you were there for that first graduation, '07, September 11th, 2007,
Yeah.
when we opened the lodge there in Colorado. But the Attorney General for the United States was there,
John Ashcroft.
John Ashcroft, yeah, and Bernie, I forgot his last name, who was the friend of the Supreme Court for the United States. He was there. When I say friend, he's one that they bounce ideas and laws off of, a brilliant man. A letter from the President of the United States was read. Congressmen, congresswomen, and senators from all over Colorado, that area. and then hundreds of guests there. And I had my graduating class sitting in front of me. And I think there were about 25, 30 guys. And I thought Brad was in that group. Now, look, I couldn't find Brad. I'm up on the third balcony where we spoke from that great lodge. And I said, where in the world is Brad? He was on the back row of the entire convocation. And I said, Brad, what are you doing back there? And he answered, I'm not worthy to be counted with these warriors that are hurt so bad serving our country and were injured honorably. This is the integrity of Brad Hearon. Listen to me. He said, I'm not worthy of that. I said, you get yourself up here. You're the best warrior on drugs I'll ever have, and I'm counting on you to carry this torch into the public schools. And so I've been speaking in public schools since 1976. That goes way back. And I remember that whenever I'd speak in schools, of course, I'm disfigured like Brad. We both lost our face, and you can see in this picture. I don't know if the folks can see this on YouTube or not, but Brad's beautiful, sweet wife, who's also a burn survivor, is there, and I'm in the middle. But my right eye, you can see, it's horrible. It's kind of like no eyelids at all on it, and I get up to speak, and little children would literally be terrified. Brad knows what I'm saying. But as I would travel the country and speak in public schools, I spoke a lot for the FFA. And I'd speak for not only local school assembly programs by FFA, but I'd speak for state conventions, like in Texas and Oklahoma. We just finished one the other day in Oklahoma with 12,000 kids.
In Colorado.
And one in Colorado with 6,000 kids, I think, with guests and friends and all. But I did the national. Well, in the nationals, we have 25, 30,000 to start with. Well, that was years ago. Now we have up to 40 and 50. Last time we had 60,000 students gathered at the National FFA Convention at the Lucas Stadium in Indianapolis. And I said, Brad, I'm asked to speak for it, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Brad, I said, if you go 1 second past, I'll never use you again. He got up, and in 5 minutes to the second, he nailed it. He was so powerfully effective. Those kids were screaming, shouting, jumping up and down, throwing their hats in the air, applauding him. And I think he scheduled 2 or 3 years of meetings in public schools after that, transforming school after school after school. And Brad, the story you just told is so gripping. There are people sitting on the side of the road in their automobile right now wiping tears. Whew. Like me. You're a gift from God, buddy. And you could have gone the other way. You could have turned your back on God, hated God. But look at the lives you changed. And then you got to meet the sweetest girl in the world. And we'll probably save that story for the next podcast we do get to do with you. I want her there. She's not available today, I understand. But I want her story and your story back on this program. But I want you to tell us, Kimmy, you remember when you were little and what you faced when your dad got out and spoke. And I used to, Brad, you're going to love this story. I used to worry my kids, what are they going to tell their friends at school about their dad with no face or no eyelid, no nose, no lips? I said, what are they going to tell them? I found out they invited the kids over to our house. They charged them 25 cents to come look at their daddy. I'm kidding.
No, that did not happen. It was $1.
I know. Brad, you have a little boy now, a beautiful, beautiful child, not a scar on him. Tell us about your little buddy.
Yeah, Autumn and I, our son was born on March the 7th, 2018, and he's our little miracle. I mean, he's absolutely amazing. We had tried for a lot of years, and the Lord just knows the perfect time whenever something like that needs to happen. And my son was born on March the 7th of 2018, and then my dad, my biggest hero in life, he actually died on March the 31st of 2018. So March of 2018 was a roller coaster of emotions.
Wow.
And I know God put that little boy in my life at that time for that exact moment. Um, there, if there was ever a time that after my accident that I thought I might actually go back to that lifestyle or start making those types of poor decisions again in my life, I would imagine it would have probably been right then. But there was never even a thought because of him in my life. He was my. There's so much joy that comes from having a child, and that unless you've had one, I don't know if you can really understand that. The thing that's so amazing about Braden is everything is so exciting to him that even the littlest things that we take for granted every day, I mean, they would light him up and he would be so excited to
Mhm.
experience and see them. And those that would bring me joy just to see that excitement in him. And he's amazing. He's intelligent. He's so just always wanting to learn and do things. He loves, being on the farm and doing all those things. It's just so awesome to see him growing up. And I'll show him pictures of me before my accident, and he'll tell me, "That's not you, Dad. You look better now." And
I love it.
and I say, "Well, why do you say that I look better now?" And he's like, "Well, you don't look like a dad there. You're not a dad.
Oh,
You're my dad. He doesn't know me any different." And he's so proud of me. And I remember how proud I was of my dad too.
sure.
Whenever your dad's always the biggest and strongest and all that, and I I'm pretty sure that all his friends at school think I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof. You know, they treat me like that too. I mean, we are constantly we have a revolving door of young men that they're young his friends that want to come over and ride four wheelers and go and shoot BB guns and just do all those fun things that you get to do out in the country. We've had a full house all summer of his little buddies staying the night, and it's just before I had kids, I think I was okay with not having kids if that's not what the Lord had for us. But now I can't imagine life without him. That's for sure.
That's
You
for
know, he
sure, Brad. And let me do something here, Brad. I'm going to ask you to do a very difficult thing. There's a part of your story that you didn't share, and you can't share it all. If we had 4 hours, we'd still be going. But there's a particular part of your story that you've told, and I don't know if you knew what an impact it had on me when I heard it. How low and how broken and how utterly devastated you were when your dad was helping you bathe, and you said to him, "I can't get any worse than this." Something to that effect. Would you take us down that road for a moment?
I've never been a person that's had to deal with depression much in life. I love life. I love living life to the fullest, sometimes too full, if you know what I mean. And I remember I was such an invalid whenever I got out of the hospital. I mean, I couldn't bathe. I was 20 years old. I had my 20th birthday while I was in a coma. Everybody got cake but me. It's not good to not get cake at the party. But I got out of the hospital and I had to rely on my parents for my very basic needs. I mean, I couldn't wipe myself after I used the restroom. I mean, heck, I couldn't even make it to the restroom on my own. Um, and I remember I was having a low day, and I was sitting in the shower chair, that chair that we just had for the shower, and my dad would just let the water run on me for about 5 or 10 minutes when I would first get in there to kind of soften up my bandages before we did dressing changes. And I remember I was sitting in there and I was looking down at the water that was pooling in the bottom of the bathtub. And I was sitting there thinking, I wonder if there's enough water in the bottom of that bathtub that if I fell forward, that I could drown myself in it. Because I mean, I was pathetic. I mean, I was just absolutely miserable at that point. And about that time that I started having these thoughts, my dad comes walking in the bathroom to help me with my dressing changes. And as he's walking in, I just remember telling him, Dad, I'm pathetic. I'm pathetic. And he says, why do you say you're pathetic, Brad? I said, Dad, do you realize that if I wanted to kill myself right now, I couldn't even do it? I said, you could hand me a gun and I couldn't even turn it and manipulate the trigger to use it. I said, Daddy, if you gave me my pills, I couldn't even open up the top of my pills to take them to do it. I said, I'm pathetic. And he said, Brad, you're not pathetic. You're not pathetic. And that didn't give me a lot of resolve. He just my dad encouraging me. He'd always been my encourager. But every morning from that point on, he would come into my bedroom whenever he would get me out of bed and he would read Jeremiah 29:11 over me. And I don't know if you know Jeremiah 29,
Yeah.
Dave. I know you, but for those of y'all watching, I don't know if you know it, but I'll quote it for you to my best of my ability.
Yeah.
Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans not to harm you, but plans to bring you a hope and a future.
Yeah.
And he would come in and he would read that scripture over me. And at first I was mad. I didn't even want to hear it. But then he didn't quit. And my dad, he's a big man. He's 6'4",
Yeah.
260 pounds. He had hands the size of catcher's mitts. I called him Paul for a reason because he had big old bear. And I remember that one day probably 3 or 4 days into this, coming in and reading Jeremiah 29:11 over me, and there was one word in there that I hung on to, and it was that word hope. Hope. And I think the reason that I hung on to that word so much is because I had no hope at that point. At that point in my life, all I could hear was the negative. And a lot of us, whenever you're going through stuff in life and you're in a real hard season of life, that's all you hear. You just listen to those lies the devil tells you, what I couldn't do. Like I said, I love life. And all I can hear is, oh, Brad, you're never going to be able to ride four-wheelers like you used to. Oh, Brad, you're never going to be able to be outside in the sun like you used to. Oh, Brad, you're never going to be able to do this. You're never going to be able to do that. And it was like this huge weight that would sit on me whenever I would hear those things. And that word hope, it kept on sticking out of me, and I was hopeless at that point. I call that point in my life the Eeyore mentality. That's what I was in. I don't know if you remember Winnie the Pooh, but he was gray in color, and I mean, he had always had a rain cloud over him. Oh, it's just so bad. It's just so miserable. And I was Eeyore at that point. And I remember my dad got a video camera at that point too, and because he could tell that I was really down and things weren't, I wasn't in a great mental state at that point. And he started videotaping me as I would go to therapy. I had to go to therapy 3 times a week, and he wouldn't tell me why he was doing it. But about 4 or 5 weeks into him videotaping me, I remember one evening we were sitting in the living room. We were watching Whose Line Is It Anywhere with Drew Carey. And he says, Brad, I want you to see this. And he took this, and I'm going to date myself a little bit, this VHS tape, and he puts it in the VR and he hits play. And at the beginning of that video, it had me, when he first started recording me, barely able to walk 5 or 6 steps unassisted. And then it goes fast forward a week later, and I'm walking around that therapy room. And 2 weeks later, I'm walking around it 3 or 4 times. And 3 weeks later, finally, by the end of it, it was whenever I walked all the way to the food court. And, at that moment, whenever I wasn't having to feel the pain of doing what I was doing, whenever I had a different perspective. I wasn't living it, right there. I was watching it. And all of a sudden, that word hope that my dad I'd been clinging on to for the last few days, it sprouted inside of me. And I realized I am getting better. And that started to grow inside of me at that point. And I thought, you know what? My mentality didn't just change overnight. It wasn't something that just happened that drastically. But I started to hold on to that hope enough that I realized I am getting better. And then my attitude started to change. It's, tell me I can't do something. Tell me I'm going to be able to do this again. And then a little bit of pride probably came in because I started to say, I'll prove to you if I can do it. And so here I am, over 20 years out of being burned. And 23 years. It's hard to believe that it's been 23 years since I've been burned. 23 years later, and you can ask the guys that work with me every single day, and they'll tell you that, yeah, Brad, you might look at him and think that he doesn't have it in him, but he's got it, because I still do everything. I mean, I still go out and beat up and down corn rows and working on sprinklers and driving semis. And I mean, the human body is so resilient.
Yeah, the Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. All your fingers are all burned off. Your face was burned off. Yeah, for those that are watching on YouTube, look at that. No fingers. And yet I've seen you on four-wheelers. You're a holy terror. You're more fun to be around because you never, ever, ever give up. You don't quit. Brad, our time's up. I know it is, but let me ask you this. Would you be willing to come back on in the future? And let's do some more of this, because I can tell you right now, people are going to go nuts over this program, because you bring hope to so many young people, so many moms and dads, people that feel like they've lost their hope. And I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to lose hope. And I know what it feels like standing on the brink of the cliff, not literally a cliff, but to actually pull the tube out that it was my feeding tube, my life tube. And did you know that it was just day before yesterday, I celebrated my life day on July 26th, the day the grenade blew up beside my head. Well, I've got one extra ear for you. You don't have either one ear, so we'll both have one ear. But lend me an ear, and we'll do this again, Brad. How can people get hold of you, Brad, if they'd like to contact you? Or would you like for people to be able to call you, or text you or email? How do they do that?
Yeah, best way would be email. And my email address is Brad, BRAD, at Klein, CLINE, Farms, FARMS, Kinsey, KINZE.com. Either that or just get a hold of my wife. She'd probably be the best way to do it. And hers is just Autumn Hearon, AUTUM, Hearon, HEARON, at gmail.com. Either one of those email addresses.
I think Autumn Hearon at email.com, gmail@email.com, whatever. You got me so tickled. You're amazing. I truly, truly, truly thank you, Brad. And I'll be in touch with you here in a little bit. We'll get set up for another date and have your sweet, beautiful wife and your little boy on. All right?
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Brad. You bring hope to so many people. Well, Kim, man, I'm wiping tears.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's on your heart, baby? What do you say? I mean, where do you start with a guy like that?
Well, I do think that when he was talking about Braden, his son, how I identify with that being, the daughter of someone who has been traumatically burned and injured. And what a joy and an honor it is just growing up for me of, kind of what Braden said, like that's not my dad, a picture of, I mean, I know that's you, but until, that's not who you are now. And there is beauty in that. And I think that people can, for those that may not have physical scars, but have emotional scars and have lived through some past wounds and, traumatic things in their lives, and they've overcome them, that their children can look at them in the same way of say, you're a different person, that you are who I know. And these scars, whether they're physical or emotional or mental, have made you who you are, and you're beautiful. You're just beautiful. And I would hope to send that out to people today who are struggling, saying, oh, my scars, they make me feel ugly, or they make me feel less than, or they make me feel like I'm always a victim. But yet how you see yourself and how your children see you, it should be beautiful.
You remember your mama one day came into the office. We had, I think we had about 57 employees in, and one of the departments was graphics art, and they had all this ability to create images and to split screen stuff. Well, they took half my face that was not burned and reversed it and put it on the other side like it was a mirror image, and made it look like I had never been burned. And And they put it on the screen of their big screen television and invited Brenda upstairs to the graphics art department.
Yeah.
And she walked in, looked at it, and she said, "Who's that?" They said, "Well, that's Dave, your husband." She looked at it again. She said, "No, that's not Dave, my husband. You put that picture in the garbage and put that face back on him. You took away the scars of his honor."
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did they scramble. They were all over that thing. Well,
Yeah.
you know, Kimmy, that's the way it is with Brad, with his little boy. That's the way it is with you, with your dad, your brother, the same way. You guys have never made me feel ashamed of myself. I always worried about it, but you never did. And there are people right now watching. If you're watching and listening on this program and you've been hurt, listen, sometimes scars on the inside are much uglier than scars on the outside. When that person says, you know whose name at the worst time, you fly off the handle. What's wrong with her? Well, she's got a scar and someone just hurt it. Listen to me. You can survive this thing. If Brad can, if I can, if his little boy and his wife can, and if you can, we can all make it. You can make it too. Kimmy, how do they get hold of us?
Well, you can go to our website, which is davereaver.org. You can reach out to us there. You can email us at info@davereaver.org or give our office a call. If you need to talk to somebody, you need to reach out and connect to Brad. We would love to facilitate that and network you as much as possible. But you're welcome to go to our website. You can read Dave's story there, as well as all of our podcast library is at davereaver.org/podcast. But we'd love to have you follow us. So if you are on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you download and listen or watch your podcast, we'd love for you to share it, subscribe, like it, whatever you need to do. But we would love to see you again and again on our future podcasts as we move forward. But other than that, we hope you just have a fantastic day, and we'll catch you next week.